It's a big site along the M25, quite well known. Lots of different agencies have been involved in trying to resolve issues there over the years, but never really been that successful, mostly due to the lay of the land and the difficulty of the animals that are there, really. There's a large number of horses there, all living together with a large number of cattle on one huge sort of field. There's little grazing, it's littered with rubbish, it's sort of like the surface of the moon, really. There's nothing there for the horses at all, so they're pretty much left to their own devices out in that field with very little human contact at all. There was sort of systematic neglect there really over a number of years, where you had 4-year-old mares pregnant, feeding 2-year-olds. Those 2-year-olds are also pregnant or with foals at foot. So, you know, as you can imagine, those 4-year-old mares were emaciated, in really poor condition, and really struggling to survive. So historically, the owners were breeders, horse breeders, and they've been living there for decades, 30, 40 years, where they've been breeding horses on that site and also keeping cattle. And as the years have gone on, the welfare has gone down, I guess because of age and the sheer number of horses that have been bred there. And I think that they've after many, many years of breeding horses and cattle, they've suddenly realised that it's actually getting out of control for them, and they're not really able to give them the care that they need. So it was really a case of trying to work with them to resolve the problems rather than anything else. I mean, these horses were living in a large herd with active stallions, so you've got sort of groups split between stallions and foals and mares, youngsters. And when they're living like that, I mean, they're flight animals anyway, so anything that frightens them, their instinct is to run away. But they will also sort of run through or over anything to get away from the thing that they're frightened of. And these are 16 hand horses. They're big, they're sort of thoroughbred hackney crosses, they're highly strung, really motivated by fear. And the environment that they lived in just exasperated that behaviour to the point where it was really prolific. With these big cases that are quite complicated and quite historic, the best way to deal with them really is to try to work with the owners where you can. And these jobs are often a huge multi-agency operation where you've got charities from all over the country coming together to help, not just with spaces but with costs, because there is a huge cost implication. So I worked closely with the RSPCA really for this job, and it different to many large roundups of horses. We had to work with a minimal team because of the difficulties on site, with the owners being quite proud and not wanting a lot of people traipsing over their land, but also because of the lay of the land itself. It's a huge site and very, very difficult to use panels like we normally would to corral the horses together. We used their actual barn system, so we sort of herded these horses into the barns and then they were run through a stable block onto lorries. But these horses are not your average horses to deal with. They were extremely feral, very, very frightened and actually quite dangerous. Nothing bad happened at all. It was a really successful rescue of all of the horses that came off the site, but it was a complicated rescue with some very difficult animals. Okay.
So 11 horses from this group came to World Horse Welfare Glenda Spooner Farm. They're various different ages. We had some very, very young foals at foot, right through to some very elderly horses. They'd clearly never really been handled in their life, certainly not well handled or handled regularly. So when the horses arrive with us, they've got no understanding of the fact that we're actually here to help them. But by nature, horses are social animals, and one of the first steps we take is to try to build a bond based on trust. So that process begins normally with food. It goes maybe some way in our favour that these horses generally arrive quite hungry, and they're quite highly motivated by food rewards. So although they're placed, out in fields with good grazing and good forage, they start to learn about the value of a pony nut in a bowl, and the first stage of that process will just be a member of yard staff going very quietly to the group and placing a line of feed bowls just inside the field and moving quietly away to a safe distance and allowing the horses to approach those bowls in their own time. And within a few days they start to recognise that a person coming to the field is bringing the food. They work out where that is coming from, so we can progress to placing the bowls in the field but staying close to the fence line, and then bringing the bowls to the field and remaining in the field, and that progress, depending on each individual horse's confidence, works towards the horse eating from the bowl while we're holding it, and then maybe taking pony nuts from the hand. And once the horse understands that the food can be a reward, then we can start to build positive reinforcement. So the horse learns that if he stands nice and still and quietly in our space, he'll be rewarded with a pony nut or with food. If the horse tolerates a gentle stroke on his neck, he'll be rewarded with food. And we can progress right through to all of the things we need the horse to comply with us on, with regards husbandry. So having their feet trimmed, having blood samples taken, having their teeth examined. We can break all those behaviours down and explain to the horse that he can comply and be rewarded, rather than being frightened or having to be medicated or sedated to make those behaviours possible. So the horses that are with us are progressing really well. We've got some very nice young stock, like Paddington here behind me, who's one of the group. He's approximately 5 months old. He's essentially sound, and no reason, with a bit more TLC, a bit more rehabilitation, and appropriate training, that he and others in the group won't go on to be brilliant riding horses of the future. They've got bright futures ahead of them with heaps of potential. And once they've had a bit more training, a bit more hands-on, and understand the fundamentals of being a horse, they'll make excellent projects for our rehomers of the future.
Hi. Wow, you've come on. You weren't like this when I came the other week. You didn't want to come anywhere near me. What if I come in and say hi? What I think they're really good at is matching, we talked about this last time I was here, matching them with the right other horse, because this is obviously really friendly and quite calm. I mean, it's amazing to be part of a team, especially dealing with a job that's been a historic problem for such a long time. Hello. Seeing these horses in the situation they're in, being an integral part of removing them, and then being able to stand with them in a farm and touch them when you couldn't get within 30 feet of them. It's incredible, really. Best job in the world. Sadly, more and more frequently now in the UK, we're coming across these very large groups of welfare concerns, multiple animals in sites that have never been handled in extremely poor condition, fairly regularly, called to situations where there might be in excess of 100 horses on a site, and considering at Glenda Spooner Farm our stocking level is 65 animals or thereabouts, to be called to a situation where there's maybe 100 horses on site is completely overwhelming. We're only able to help horses like this through the support of voluntary donations. I mean, if this hadn't have been resolved, I can see that this would have led to horses dying, really. This mare, she's 4, she's pregnant, she's got a foal with her. She was probably feeding a 2-year-old as well. And there's only so long that sort of neglect can really go on before it becomes a serious problem. If it wasn't for the donations from our supporters, we really wouldn't be able to do this work, and little fillies like this would still be left in the situations that she was in before, rather than having a great life here with Wild Horse Welfare.